Indianapolis and IndyCar in general, really, is full of incredibly historically significant and dramatic moments, from Alexander Rossi's 2016 win to the Lotus 56 turbine car to the 1990s split, all the way up to this year's win with Joseph Newgarden at the Indy 500 after all these years. What I'm trying to say, and there's always an interesting story to be told. And well, Porsche's involvement in the 1980s was certainly a story, one shrouded in confusion, chaos, and disaster. But is it really as deserving of the hatred as some think it should be? Well, let's take a look at it. Porsche is the most successful team in the history of motorsport, having won almost every international competition you can think of. They've won endurance racing, sports car racing, rallying, Pikes Peak, and even a Formula One Grand Prix. In 1986 alone, they took their second Dakar Rally win. Their tag turbo engine powered McLaren to their third F1 driver's title in a row, and at Le Mans, they took a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10 finish. For good reason, their confidence was at an all-time high. And they had a crazy idea: follow through with their IndyCar plan from years gone by. So let's backtrack a bit. Interscope Racing was an American motor racing team in the 1970s, and they had some close ties with Porsche after their Daytona 24-hour win in the 935. And in 1978, the two of them teamed up to enter the Indy 500 for 1980. The plan was pretty simple: buy a Parnelli chassis and stick a Porsche engine in it. But to make it more cost efficient, they would simply use their monstrous 935 engine from Le Mans. Of course, it would have to be detuned for IndyCar regulations, so it went from a 3-liter twin-turbocharged flat-six to a 2.65-liter single-turbocharged flat-six. So it only made 630 horsepower instead of the Moby Dick's 800 plus. The Project 940 was immediately competitive, setting a 4-lap average of 191 miles an hour during Indy 500 qualifying simulation. And that freaked out IndyCar legend AJ Foyt, who did not want that competition and hatched a plan of his own. He threatened to quit the USAC and join their arch-rivals CART. Because remember, at the time, the US had rival IndyCar series, which nearly destroyed the entire sport, but whatever. In the meantime, it meant that both companies wanted as much of the IndyCar market as you could, and if AJ Foyt left, that would be a huge boost to CART. So it forced the USAC's hands. Magically, a month before Indy, the rules were changed from 1.8 bars a boost to 1.6, which just so happened to be what Foyt was running. Now, Porsche had explicitly designed their engines for 1.8 bar, and did not have the time or the money to rebuild their engine, and had to shut down the program before even setting foot in Indiana. So with all that context, let's jump back to the end of the 1980s. Porsche CEO Peter Schultz decided to finish what they started and gave Porsche's North American Motorsports Director Al Horbert the go-ahead. Unlike the 940, this was going to be an all-Porsche effort. No March or Lola chassis here. The 2708 had a brand new 2.7-liter turbocharged V8, making 800 horsepower. All that is the name, if you didn't pick up on it. And given Porsche's dominance in sports car racing, they knew they had a winning chassis on their hands. So, they were brave and contested the last two races in 1987 to see how they would fare for 1988. And, for all of our military history buffs out there, it wasn't so much Desert Storm as it was Russia's attack on Kiev. Maybe it was overconfidence, or maybe it was their lack of IndyCar design experience, but whatever it was, the pace just wasn't there. The 2708 didn't have much wind tunnel time, and it had even less actual track time. So even four-time Indy 500 winner Al Unser couldn't go faster than third to last in qualifying. The car was heavy and the downforce was absent, which meant that their lap 7 DNF must have been a blessing just to end the suffering. And then in the final race of the season, they saved themselves from another racing embarrassment in Long Beach when they didn't even qualify, preventing any racing that could have embarrassed them. Now, some say that the driver sabotaged the 2708 in Long Beach to convince Porsche to use a customer chassis, but honestly, I just don't think the Porsche team had the aerodynamic experience with Indy cars. And yeah, maybe the drivers weren't as good as Al Unser. Obviously they weren't. Al didn't want to come back after the disaster that was Laguna Seca. But those sabotage rumors, I think that's just an excuse made by some team members on the Porsche side to, hide the fact their car was so awful. But they were still committed for 1988, and they did what they should have done in the first place, team up with March Engineering to make the March-Porsche 88P. Teo Fabi had an okay season. I mean, it wasn't terrible, certainly compared to the end of 1987, but for a full-time IndyCar season, it wasn't great. He had a best finish of 4th at Nazareth, and 7 more point-scoring finishes to end up 10th overall in the championship, with Porsche second to last in the Constructors' title. He did, though, get the 88P to 8th during his Indy 500 qualifying, only for his team to forget how to attach a tire during his first pit stop, which promptly caused it to fall off and retire the car. Now, many thought that Porsche would use this data from the 88P on their 2708 program to go back to an all-Porsche effort, but that idea died once and for all when Al Horbert died in a plane crash October of that same year. And the new guy in charge, Derek Walker, just didn't want to deal with the 2708 anymore. It was ancient history, don't speak of it again, moving on. And he stuck it out with March, which turned out to be a wise decision for Porsche, as the 89P was significantly better. It was a more refined car, and Porsche had actual experience under their belts. Saying that, the first 3 races weren't great. 1 6th-place finish, followed by 2 DNFs, including the Indy 500 just 23 laps in. But then Fabi scored a 3rd in Milwaukee, and then 3 4th-place finishes in a row. He even got pole position in Portland. This was starting to work. I mean, the team got their best ever oval track finish when he came across the line in P2 at Michigan International Speedway. And then there was Mid-Ohio. Porsche was testing out a new technology only recently used in Formula 1, carbon fiber, and they built the rear wing out of the lightweight stuff to see how it worked. Turns out, really bloody well, especially at the twisty tracks like Mid-Ohio. Fabi took another pole position and remained in complete control of the race, only losing the lead during his pit stop, and he crossed the line on the top step of the podium. Porsche had won their first ever IndyCar race, and then backed it up with another 2nd place finish at Road America. Fabi finished 4th overall in the standings, with Porsche 3rd, and for engine manufacturers, just 5 points shy of Cosworth. Porsche had finally cracked the code and embarked on a 2-car team for 1990 with their revolutionary all-carbon fiber March-Porsche 90P. Except they didn't. The other teams, having seen the success with Porsche in the second half of the season, were terrified of this carbon fiber witchcraft, and conveniently, carbon fiber was banned for 1990 in an almost carbon copy of Porsche's 940 program from a decade prior. And again, like the 940, with no time to develop a new car, they ended up tweaking their 1989 chassis into 1990 spec. And, well, it was 87 all over again. Overweight, underpowered, and lacking the necessary reliability. I mean, John Andretti qualified 10th at that year's Indy 500, but neither of the Porsche drivers finished the race. Fabi got one podium position in New Jersey, but Andretti ended up being the highest placed driver at the end of the year in another 10th overall. Now, ironically, despite being a pretty terrible season in the grand scheme of things, Porsche got their best ever engine constructors result, beating Cosworth by countback when they tied for second at 72 points. Although there is a caveat to that, they're only second because Chevy absolutely dominated everyone, beating the two of them by nearly 300 points. And with that, Porsche ceased IndyCar operations at the end of the season, and they haven't been back since. Porsche had a sobering reality check. They let their overconfidence get the better of them, and they underestimated the complexity of American open-wheel racing. As a result, they came in with a poor design and even poorer logistics, something that Europeans still haven't learned apparently. But here's the thing, I sort of hinted at this in the previous section at the end. It would be unfair to hold the entire program in that light. The superlatives of overweight, unprepared, and inept really only apply to the 2708 in 1987. Porsche had competent cars in 1980 and 1990, only for IndyCar to clamp down on them so hard that it ended any hopes of success before the wheels even turned in Indianapolis. So instead of looking at Porsche's IndyCar program as a Porsche failure, you should really look at it as an IndyCar failure. They had a golden opportunity to provide a new era of competition within IndyCar, while providing fans a new factory team to support that was eager and motivated with lots of money ready for investment. But because CART was run by the competitors themselves and not an independent organization like IMSA or the FIA, the other teams acted in their own self-interest instead of the interests of the sport. And that might be the biggest tragedy of them all.